All right, good evening. Everybody doing well? Okay. Any prayer requests or announcements we need to make tonight? Okay, that's good news. All right, transplant went well. Um, Anybody else? Carl? Oh, okay. All right. Alicia's baby. Whoa, we're getting louder and louder. Um, on Friday, you said. Okay. All right. And anything else? Everybody can pray that Melissa gets back. No, she's fine. Uh, Talked with her each day. She's out in Washington State with her mother right now, trying to help her out a little bit, and so that's all going well. And I'm actually able to find food, just scavenge around, and been able to take care of myself. So, um, actually, in 42 years, this is maybe only my fourth or fifth time ever having to do this. So, um, okay. But Carl can tell you it's no fun when the wife goes away, because he's come and cried on my shoulder before when his wife left it for a while. Okay, let's bow in prayer at this time. I'm sorry, I missed something there apparently. For a while, she did. Yeah, she went up and visited family. I didn't mean anything other than that. And Carl just would come his knuckles would drag on the ground as he came walking into the office over here, and would talk. And um, anyway, he would attest to it. Maybe he wouldn't in public, but he would anyway. All right, let's bow for prayer. Father, we're thankful for this good news, and just praying that this transplant and all things take well and go well, and that the recovery and the acceptance will work, and just everything goes fine there. Pray for Alicia, that this birth will go well, and know there's been some angst leading up to this at different times, but just praying that everything goes smoothly, and you'll be with her, be with the baby, and with the whole family. We're thankful for your love and care that you have provided for us. And we're thankful for your word that helps us to know how we should live. We know it's there, and sometimes we just don't follow through on the very things that we should. And Father, for that we apologize. We ask for your mercy to be extended to us. We know that without your mercy and without your grace, we couldn't be anything and wouldn't have anything. So thank you for all that you've provided and all that you offered to us. Bless our study tonight and open our eyes to see the wonderful things you have in store for us. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, we're going to move actually back up in the text tonight. We're talking about tonight we're going to start into duties to ourselves. We were talking about duties to others the last several weeks. But duties to ourselves, we're in Romans chapter 12, the text really verses 9 and forward. I've mentioned it a couple of times. I think it's just a great place that it encapsulates the life of a Christian, what a Christian should do, how a Christian should live, what a Christian should be like. Now, last week we dealt with the subject of peacefulness, and I mentioned that by my count, it appears in every book of the New Testament except 1 John and Revelation. And the Hebrew word shalom, which is translated peace in our English Bible, is found nearly 250 times in the Old Testament. So, just a casual approach and a casual reading or knowledge of that tells you that obviously being at peace or having peace or being peaceful and peace-loving people is very important to God. And so we talked about that last week. And so as we move on, I want you to look at we're going to move back up, as I said in the text, to verse 11. And Actually, verse 10 begins the sentence better. Be kindly affectionate to one another with brotherly love and honor, preferring or giving giving preference to one another. Then verse 11, not lagging in diligence, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord. The Old King James says, not slothful in business, fervent in spirit. The New American Standard says, not lagging behind in diligence, fervent in spirit. The NIV says, never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor. The New Century Version says, do not be lazy, but work hard. And the New Living Translation says, never be lazy in your work. And just to round it out, the Message, which sometimes I put in for pure comic relief, says, don't burn out, keep yourselves fueled and aflame. That's not a translation, that's for sure, but it's kind of a, I guess it's Eugene Peterson's view of what he thinks that verse is saying. So laziness should never be named among the people of God. So just confession here this morning. I didn't sleep very well last night, and so woke up at 5:30 this morning, got up and did a few things around the house, then came down here, worked at the office, and finished a project I've been working on for the last couple of months today. And I said, you know what? I didn't have a watch on, so looking at my wrist didn't help any. I pulled up my phone and I looked at that and I said, okay, it's 2:15 and I'm tired. So I went home and did nothing up until just said, okay, at 6:30 I got to get in the car and drive back down here. So diligence, or the opposite of that, laziness or lagging in diligence, or whatever. I think it's something that we all deal with from time to time, and we all face days or weeks or periods of time, maybe we should say, that we just don't have the drive that we did before on something. Maybe we're working on something and you finish a project, like I mentioned. So I've been doing a lot of drive to get that done, finished that today, and it was like, okay, so what am I going to do for the next few hours? I'm just tired. I don't want to do anything. So you have those days? You know? You said, oh yes, you jumped out there with that, Joe. Okay. So what he's talking about here, not lagging in diligence, but fervent in spirit. I really want to look at three different areas of diligence tonight. We're going to talk about diligence in business, our work, whatever it is that we do, diligence in the family, and diligence in spiritual matters. And I want to kind of break it down that way a little bit. So first of all, this word slothful or lagging, as it's translated, I don't know what translation you're using at verse 11, not lagging in diligence or not slothful. The Greek word is akneros, which means sluggish or backward or shrinking, even could be translated irksome. It's only used 3 times in the New Testament. And so he says, don't be sluggish, or don't be backward. Don't be shrinking back from what you ought to be doing, is what it says. But rather to be fervent, and it's the Greek word zeo, which means to be hot or to boil with heat. Metaphorically, it's used of like burning in anger or burning in love or burning in greed. You could have that kind of aspect about you. So a Christian is not to shy away from or shrink back or be sluggish in their work. Rather, they are to be on fire, as it were, to be boiling in that sense. So what do you think, and this is, this is not a right or wrong answer, this is, what do you think about the work ethic in our country today? What would you say about it? Huh? Not very good? Okay. Anybody else want? Okay. All right. Okay, so there's a little commercial there for Publix. Okay, that's all right. But So she said that service is not as good as it used to be, or years ago used to be in different businesses. What? Somebody else? Oh, Steve. Uh-huh. Well, I mean, is that because people are out of work or because people won't work? I mean, we don't, just seeing the signs doesn't say, but okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Gwen? Okay. All right. Steve in front. Okay. Okay. Anybody else want to weigh in? I will say that. Oh, go ahead, Wade. Okay. Um, Now, I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say I am guessing that everybody who spoke is above 40. That's not much of a limb, I realize, but I'm protecting myself. Um, but is it, as we often say, the younger generation? I mean, I think probably all generations have felt this to a certain extent. The superiority of, well, we had to do this and that, and we did this or that, or we worked hard, or whatever the case is. I'm not disagreeing with anybody. I'm just saying that's a generational statement. I think that's been stated over and over and over through the years. It's always easy to have a feeling of a sense of superiority of what we did, what we went through, what we experienced versus what somebody else does. And so I think that sometimes is unfair, but I would have to agree with most of what all that's been said as far as what seems to be a work ethic, at least among many, is it's more of I deserve this rather than I need to go and work for this. I'm not exactly sure how or when this kind of mentality switched in the minds of some. So we talk about sometimes, or we hear about the greatest generation, that people who stepped up and did and served because they felt a sense of duty, responsibility, pride in their country, pride in their work, whatever the case was, in their family. But diligence, it certainly is not in some. I can say that without any issue, and I think everybody can agree with that. And there are others who seem to be very diligent in what they do. Now, here's what the Bible says, Ecclesiastes chapter 9 and verse 10. We'll start out with a few verses here. Whatever your hand finds to do, what does he say? Do it with your might, he says, for there is no work or device or knowledge or wisdom in the grave where you are going. So he says, work now because you're not going to be able to later. I mean, we're all going to be in the grave in that sense. So whatever your hand finds to do it with your might. So let's talk about diligence in business, okay? You've been reading the book of Proverbs. Many of you have over and over and over again. So look at Proverbs chapter 6, verses 6 through 11. Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise, which, having no captain, overseer, or ruler, provides her supplies in summer and gathers her food in the harvest. How long will you slumber, O sluggard? And when will you rise from your sleep? A little folding of the hands to sleep, so shall your poverty come on you like a prowler, and your need like an armed man. So he says, just take a look at an ant crawling along the ground, or a group of ants. They don't have a captain, they don't have a leader. That's kind of used accommodatively because there really is one who's leading in that sense. But the idea, they don't have somebody bossing them around, telling them what to do, but they work and they're diligent in what they do. They provide what they need, and it's done. You know, I don't know if you could crawl into the mind of an ant if the ant goes, oh, not again today. But he does, I mean, they work. There's diligence, there's moving. It's not a slothfulness. But the other, he says, you look at the other one who just, well, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll get to it later. A little slumber, a little folding of the hands and sleep. Your poverty comes on you like a prowler. Chapter 10 and verse 4, he who is slack of hand becomes poor, is what he says. And then just to see, I mean, so laziness leads to poverty is what the wise man is telling us. Laziness is a curse. Look at chapter 10 and verse 26. As vinegar is to the teeth and smoke to the eyes, so is a lazy man to those who sent him. It's a curse. Don't send a lazy man to go do your work. Why? It's not going to get done. Don't send him on a mission to send this message or whatever it is. It's not going to get done, or it's not going to get done in time. I mean, it may eventually, when they get around to it, get this thing done. But so is a lazy man to those who send him. And laziness is something shameful. It's not just something of, well, you know, he's got a lot more energy than I do. It's a shameful thing. Look at chapter 10 and verse 5, move back up. He who sleeps in harvest is a son who causes shame. So at harvest time, what should you be doing? Working, collecting, harvesting, reaping, okay, bringing all of this in. And he says it's a shame to be the son who just sleeps during the harvest time. But diligence will be rewarded financially. We'll move back up in chapter 10. Look at verse 4. It says, the second line of verse, well, we read the first line. He who has a slack hand becomes poor. Look at the second line. But the hand of the diligent makes rich. And then the first line of verse 5, and he who gathers in summer is a wise son. Don't just put these things off. Diligence will be rewarded financially. In chapter 13 and verse 4, the soul of a lazy man desires but has nothing, but the soul of the diligent shall be made rich. And diligence is rewarded with honor. Chapter 22 and verse 29. Do you see a man who excels at his work? He'll stand before kings. He'll not stand before unknown men. So diligence is rewarded with honor. He'll stand before kings. It's not like he's a nobody. He actually is working. He's known for his work. Things are going well. He's blessed financially, so on and so forth. So does that mean that all people who work hard are going to be rich? Huh? No, not necessarily. I mean, you may work 2 or 3 jobs and just be scraping by, right? Right? Okay, there are plenty of people in this country who do just that. They work 2 and 3 jobs and they barely eke out a living. It's not because they've got, 2 boats and an RV and a 6-bedroom house or whatever. They're just barely eking out a living, some people. And it's a challenge for them. And diligence is rewarded by God. Probably we don't emphasize this part of it, but look at Proverbs chapter 31. This passage that is well known to many as being the passage that's commending this worthy woman, dropping down to verse 10, or a virtuous woman. But why is she so commended? Well, listen. Who can find a virtuous wife? For her worth is far above rubies. The heart of her husband safely trusts in her, so that he will have no lack of gain. Why, we could ask. Well, she does him good and not evil all the days of her life. She seeks wool and flax and willingly works with her hands. She's like the merchant ship. She brings her food from afar. She also rises while it's yet night and provides food for her household and a portion for her maidservants. She considers a field and buys it. From her profits, she plants a vineyard. She girds herself with strength and strengthens her arms. She perceives that her merchandise is good and her lamp does not go out by night. She stretches out her hands to the distaff and her hands hold the spindle. She extends her hands to the poor. Yes, she reaches out her hands to the needy. She's not afraid of the snow for her household, for all her household is clothed with scarlet. She makes tapestry for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them and supplies sashes for the merchants. Strength and honor are her clothing, so she shall rejoice in the time to come. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and on her tongue is the law of kindness. She watches over the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and call her blessed. Her husband also, when he praises her, saying, many daughters have done well, but you excel them all. Charm is deceitful and beauty is passing, but a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her the fruit of her hands and let her own works praise her in the gate. So how would you describe this woman? Huh? What'd you say? I'm sorry? Tired, okay. All right. She certainly should be tired, right? She is the epitome, that's what we're talking about here, the perfection, as it were, of the person who is, God says, this is this woman who's just the ideal woman. And she's got all of these different characteristics and qualities and so on. He's not describing a woman herself, but the ideal, the perfect woman. Just like Job chapter 31 is, I think these are two great passages to look together. Proverbs 31, the worthy woman, and Job 31 is the worthy man, as to what he does and how he conducts his life and what he does with himself. But have you seen examples of people that you would put into this kind of category? Not just the worthy woman, but who are diligent and they've been rewarded for their diligence, or they've been honored for how they work and what they do. Have you seen that before? Okay. Thank you. Have you seen the laziness that leads to poverty and leads to being, it's just a shameful thing? Wow, you guys are great now. You're picking up on it. Okay. When we lived in the little town, let me just tell you this story because it amazes us. Melissa and I, we knew this couple, Steve and Vicky, and Steve had been out of work. Let me see, I've got it in my notes here. He'd been out of work for over 2 years. This was years ago when we lived out in Oregon. And he'd been out of work for over 2 years, not because he couldn't find a job, but because he couldn't find the job. He wanted to drive a truck for the local sand and gravel company in town. And so for over 2 years, he waited and waited, wouldn't take jobs. His wife worked, tried to keep the family going, and so on and so forth. And finally one day, Vicky came into church. She said, I got great news. She said, the name of the company was Scappoose Sand and Gravel. Scappoose, they just called. Scappoose was the name of the town, by the way. They just called and they hired Steve, and they want him to start this week. So she said, she was over the moon. This was the greatest thing ever. And so, everybody, when Steve came in, were just, hey, high-fiving and just so happy and glad for him and whatever. And so it was about a week and a half later, he came in dressed dragging one Wednesday night, like a lot of y'all do when you come in here on Wednesday night. And I said, Steve, what's going on? He said, I quit. And I said, you quit? This was the job. I said, what's going on? What happened? He said, They wanted me to work 50 hours a week. He said, I wasn't going to work 50 hours a week. Okay. I mean, how do you argue with that? 50 hours a week. I can't do that. I've been out of work for over 2 years. But anyway, it's just a sad thing when you see that. And Christians ought to be the best workers that anybody could hire. It ought to be that way. That if you're going to hire somebody because you have a business and you hire this guy or this woman who is a Christian, you ought to be able to say, okay, they may not be able to get everything. They may not be the brightest, bulb in the box, but they'll work. They'll do, and they'll put forth the effort. They should, anyway. Okay. Other thought on that? Anything else that you wanted to say? Somebody? Yes, sure. Right. Okay, yeah. Okay. And I have to say, I'm glad you said that, but because I was down one time at Betty Cakes when Sharon was working there, and she was managing the Betty Cakes in there, and there were a couple of these young girls, basically just high school girls, I'm guessing, and they weren't working. They were just kind of standing around doing next to nothing. And Sharon walked over to him and she said, it's not like you're getting paid. And she said, oh, wait, you are. So get to work. Yeah. But I thought that was a great, it's not, not like wait, you are getting paid. So putting forth effort, putting forth work, we ought to be diligent workers. Christians ought to be great examples of that stand out in a company or at a business or whatever kind of thing. That I know I can count on him. I know I can count on her. If it's show up at 8 o'clock, they're here at 8 o'clock. If it's work till 5, whatever it is, or get this done, they'll get it done if it takes till 7 or 8, because this is their job. Okay, so let's talk about diligence in the home. Okay. First of all, let's just start out with the guys. Husbands need to love and care for their wives and for their families. That ought to be a diligent effort on the part of the husband. Listen to Ephesians chapter 5. Husbands, love your wives, verse 25. Husbands, love your wives. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her, that he might sanctify and cleanse her with the washing of water by the word, that he might present her to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she should be holy and without blemish. So husbands ought to love their own wives as their own body. He who loves his wife loves himself. And then in 1 Peter chapter 3 and at verse 7, husbands, likewise dwell with them or with your wives with understanding, giving honor to the wife as to the weaker vessel, as being joint heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers may not be hindered. You see, there is a spiritual element in our work as husbands. He says, do this so that your prayers aren't hindered. Now, that can be taken two ways. Either number one, God's not going to hear my prayers because I'm not doing like I should be doing. Or number two, I'm not praying like I should because I'm not living like I should. And so I just hinder my own prayers in that regard. They're hindered because I'm not doing like I should. But there should be diligence in that. But what often happens is we get lazy, right? We get lazy as husbands, and we get, we'll look at it in just a minute as to some of the reasoning behind this. But look in Ephesians chapter 5 again, and we find out that wives need to show love and care and respect as well. Ephesians 5, moving up to verse 22. Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ also is the head of the church, and he is the Savior of the body. Therefore, just as the church is subject to Christ, so let their wives be to their own husbands in everything. And in verse 31 talks about that she should respect and show respect in that regard to her husband. Again, the passage we just read in Proverbs 31, verses 10 through 31 on the worthy woman, how she cares for her husband. She does him good and not evil all the days of her life. Her husband is known in the gates because of his good and godly wife, that she helps him to stand out in the community, as it were. So wives need to be diligent in that aspect. Parents need to be diligent in the way that they lead and love their children. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4. Fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, or the Colossian letter, sister passage of that. Don't provoke your children to discouragement, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. As parents, we need to be diligent in the way that we try to train and love and discipline and lead our families. Children, chapter 6, the first 3 verses of Ephesians. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and your mother, which is the first commandment with promise that it may be well with you and that you may live long on the earth. So, why do you feel that so many families get lazy when it comes to showing care and love and respect? Whether we're talking about husbands or wives or parents or children. I mean, whichever one of those you want to tackle, or all 4 of them. Why do you think it is that we become lazy in it? Oh, Carl? Okay. 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 Yeah, I think that's a good point. And you're right, it does take more effort, it does take more discipline personally to discipline and instruct and lead a child. Usually in the short run, we're a whole lot better off if we do it than if doing it every day for the next 20 years or whatever the case is. Steve. Now, I think, now I could be reading something into that, but I believe there may be slight exaggeration in your statement. Okay, all right, all right. Oh, I thought I meant on the thing that you call them and they'll do it. That was what I was talking about. Okay, Drew. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what Carl was saying too, that it's easier not to do it than to do it. And that's really in a lot of ways. I mean, the diligence aspect of not just I've got to step in and I'm going to have to discipline my child, or I'm going to have to do this, but just to be the person that's constantly being the person that I should be. I mean, that just takes diligence, as we're talking about. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, our family's not as bad as their family. Yeah, whatever that we can do that. We're okay. Somebody's car alarm is going off, by the way, which obviously means that there's crooks all over the parking lot. Okay. Okay. So what about familiarity breeds contempt? Is that a fair statement? That's kind of been, handed down as a proverb almost in our country. What do we mean by that? Nobody's ever heard that before? Oh, then we just get lazy. I mean, I think that we're just so used to it. This is how my wife is. This is how my kids are. We're just so used to it, we don't do anything. We just become lazy. Huh? Right. Well, yeah, it can work, but it also can just make it to where just that's how she always is. Just forget it. Just yeah. No, I think you're. I think that's exactly right. I mean that when whether if a man doesn't do his role, somebody's going to do it. Whether it's his wife or his kids or somebody's going to do it. Right. Okay. Uh, yeah, whether they're there or not, that they're absent from the home. Yeah. But this idea of laziness, I think it just we get distracted, we get busy, we don't want to do. It's easier not to do. Yeah, Diane. Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a home that, not a Christian home, and I mean, I knew even before I became a Christian, I knew I wasn't going to do what my dad did. I didn't want to do what my dad did, as far as the alcohol and everything else. But I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to be a husband. Didn't know how to be a father. I've had young men tell me before, it's hard being a husband. It's hard doing what I need to do. And I said, yeah, it is. Join the human race. That's what, I mean, it's hard being a wife too. I'm confident, and I'm not one. But I know that. So what are some things we can do to be more diligent as husbands and wives and parents? What can we do to be more diligent? Okay. Okay, and maybe go back to what Edwin was saying about what job is. My job is this, my role is this, your role is that, so on and so forth. That helps out. Okay, somebody else? Yeah, it's the word, not the world. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Carl? Okay, so I need to make and if you live by a schedule that you calendar out on your phone or in a book or whatever, making yourself schedule some time. I need to do this or spend this kind of time. Okay, Joe. Hmm. Yeah, I can see that. That would be. I mean, whether you write it on a tablet or just that was your mindset. Okay, what is my purpose today? And if it is to love my children, to love my husband, my wife, whatever, whoever, however, that would fit in there. Okay. Mhm. I've had people tell me that too, and I don't know that I've ever been that diligent. I wish I could say that I pray for somebody every day, but I think that's marvelous when somebody has that aspect about them. Um, what else? Anybody else have something? William? Okay. 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 So, and to tag on what Drew had said earlier, rather than being selfish, you're thinking of being selfless. Of what could I do to help out in this situation? How could I help my wife today? What would be beneficial for her, or for my children, or whatever the case would be. Okay, let me just look at this last section here on diligence in spiritual matters. All of this is spiritual, but in spiritual matters. So 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 15. Be diligent to present yourself approved to God, a workman who does not need to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. So to present ourselves approved to God, we need to extend or put forth effort and diligence. Hebrews chapter 10 and verse 25. This has been bandied about and used and abused, this text, but not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as is the manner of some, but exhorting one another so much the more as you see the day approaching. That we come together to exhort, to encourage, to build one another up. That's why we should be gathering. John chapter 9 and verse 4, Jesus said, I must work the works of him who sent me while it is what? Day, for the night is coming when no one can work. See, there is I have to do what I have to do. I need to do this. I need to get this done, Jesus said. 1 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 12, let no one despise your youth, but be an example to the believers in word, in conduct, in love, in spirit, in faith, and in purity. Put forth that kind of effort. 1 Thessalonians chapter 1 and verse 8.
The world, yeah.
For from you the word has sounded forth, not only in Macedonia and Achaia, but in every place. Your faith to God has gone out, so much so that we don't need to say anything. So Paul says the church there at Thessalonica was to be so highly commended, it's almost like we don't even have to go out and preach. You've done it all. That's diligence that they put forth. So
the world, yeah.
How does apathy, if you care to answer this, making yourself schedule sometimes, I need to do this or spend this kind of time. Okay. Thank you for laughing. I do. Well, go ahead, Edwin. Okay. Yeah, Jody goes home early on.
The world, yeah.
Okay, I thought you said okay. That's great, and I thought you said lights as in the sense of light.
I mean, whether you write it on a tablet or just if that was your
thing too. So if
mindset, okay, what is my purpose today?
The world's already distracted.
To love my children,
with a gazillion things out there,
love my husband, my wife,
encouraging and beckoning people to do whatever. And if the church is filled with apathy, if we're apathetic in how we view serving God and serving one another,
world,
loving one another, then as William said, we're not going to be bringing more people in. And ultimately,
I've had people tell me
in
that too,
scenario,
and
the
I don't
church
know,
will die. Now, I know it'll always
that
be
I've
here. God
ever
made a promise of that. But ultimately,
I wish I could
what
say
that says is, if
that
we're
I pray
not
for
passing it
somebody
on, if we're not teaching, if we're not leading others, then the church continues to shrink and shrink and shrink. And that's what goes on. And so apathy
I think
feeds
that's marvelous
right into the hands of
aspect about them.
It's not that important.
What else? Anybody else
so
have something?
It belies every principle of Scripture. And yet, I know I could speak for the elders and say, sometimes that's the hardest thing to deal with in a church. Is to get people to do what they need to do.
So and to tag on what Drew had said earlier, rather than being selfish or thinking of being selfless,
but it's to say,
what could I do to help out?
You need to do this is for you and for your
benefit. Let me just look at this last section here on diligence in spiritual matters. All of this is spiritual, but in spiritual matters. So,
why should I?
2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 15. Be diligent to present yourself approved to God, a workman who does not need to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth.
So, if that's the case.
So to present ourselves approved to God, Jesus said, I must work the works of him who sent me while it is
Galatians chapter 6 and verse 9.
Day, for the night is coming when no one can work. See, there is I have to do what I have to do. I need to do this. I need to get this done.
Reap if we don't lose heart.
1 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 12. Let no one despise your youth, but be an example to the believers in word and conduct, in love. Your faith to God has gone out, so much so that we don't need to say anything.
But don't get so
Paul says the church there at Thessalonica was to be so highly commended, it's almost like we don't even have to go out and preach. You've done it all. That's diligence that they put forth.
There'll be a reward that comes.
How does apathy,
and verse 15,
if you care to
therefore,
answer
my
this,
beloved brethren,
making yourself schedule some time. I need to do this or spend this kind of time.
Always abounding.
Thank you for
Joe,
laughing.
knowing that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. One other one, Hebrews chapter 6, verses 11.
The world, yeah.
Okay, I thought you said,
okay,
that's great. And I thought you said light.
I mean, whether you write it on a tablet or just
the end, that you do not become sluggish, but imitate those who through faith and patience inherit the promises. So, what is the promise that's waiting? Heaven. And so God says, don't become sluggish. Don't just kind of plod your way through and it take a stick of dynamite to get you to do anything as far as spirituality is concerned. That you show the same kind of diligence as these great examples of faith to the full measure of hope until the end. Don't give up. Keep being diligent. Don't become sluggish, but imitate those who through faith and patience inherit the promise. Look at those who have gone on, even people you know. It doesn't have to be just Bible characters, but people you know who live their life a life of faith. And they live their life of faith right up till the very end. And he says, look at people like that and be encouraged by people like. Can you think of people like that? Do you know of some folks? Okay. Yeah, I mean, that we know of folks in this family. You may have some in your personal family or that you've known through the years. But the idea is put forth the promise, the effort. Don't give up because the promise is still out there. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate your attention tonight. And you may, as always.